It's one out of 4 studios currently the ministry has. Well, folks, this time of the year, people celebrating Christmas, and in the spirit of Christmas. And what I like about this month is the fact this month is basically reminds me of the work that LLBN does for 12 months of the year, and not just 1 month, and that's sharing Jesus' glory. And more important, or more so, here at LLBN, not only in December, but throughout the year, we celebrate 3 significant things Jesus did for us: his birth, his death on the cross to save us all, and his resurrection that gives us hope and promise for the second life that we all qualify for. So there are 3 gifts being given to us by the Lord by simply giving his kingdom to become a man on this earth. So with that being said, we have a great program here today, and we are visiting here with a number of friends and colleagues who will be together lifting up God's name. Welcome to my 2 co-hosts for the day. Mekensie Campbell is filling in for somebody.
Yes.
We keep having changes. Everyone is busy these days, and we're rotating a number of co-hosts. So welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.
You'll be handling the music for us today.
Yep.
And Marlon, long-time friend, old friend, not by age, but by years of friendship.
Emphasize the old.
Well, we're all getting there, right?
Yeah.
So welcome, and thank you for supporting the ministry of LLBN on a continued basis.
Thank you.
My guest today is going to be Dr. Rafael Canizales. He is a program host on the LLBN Latino, and something you're going to learn about here in a few more weeks as we are starting to highlight all the programs that produce on all the different networks. But until that time, today he's our guest speaker, and welcome, sir.
Thank you.
And,
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. What is your message going to be about today?
Well,
Have you given it thought yet?
Say again?
Have you given it thought yet?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, obviously. We are going to talk about one person who is pretty much neglected during the whole Christmas narrative, the whole birth of Christ narrative.
We look forward to that message. Marlon, what do we have? Is it Mekensie next for music, or not yet?
Not yet. Let me tell you who we are going to be talking to. His name is Dale Goodson, and he's a missionary trainer from Adventist Frontier Missions. And we're going to talk about Papua New Guinea and how to be a missionary, and where the missionaries go in this day and age. All that and more on this edition of Christian Connections. Kinsey?
Yep, so we are very blessed to have Mark Pollard and Albert Lee with us. Mark will be singing, and Albert will be on the piano. And so we're going to find out more about them later, but for now, we're going to go to their first song, Ordinary People.
Just ordinary people, God chooses plain ordinary people. He chooses people just like me and you, who are willing to do as he commands. He chooses people that will give their all. It doesn't matter how small your role may seem to you. Your little bit becomes so much when you place it in the Master's hand. Ooh, just ordinary people. that will give their all. It doesn't matter how small your role may seem to you. Your little bit becomes so much when you place it in the Master's hands. He chooses people that will give their all. It doesn't matter how small your role may seem to you. Your little bit becomes so much when you place it. Oh, your little bit becomes so much just when you place it. It doesn't matter how small your all may seem to you. Just place it in the Master's hands. Oh, 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 oh.
Amen. That was beautiful. Mark, go ahead and join us on the stage here. Isn't it wonderful that God uses ordinary people like me and you to do his work?
It really is.
So how long have you been singing, or when did you first start singing?
I've been singing since I was a little kid. My mom and dad are pastors in Pomona. And my mom pretty much forced me to start singing. Out of 6 boys, she said, you're going to sing Yes, Jesus Loves Me today. And that's when I pretty much started singing in church. And been pretty much singing ever since.
That's awesome. So the person in your life who motivated you to sing was your mother?
My mom, yeah.
That's cool, because, you know, I come from a family who, I can't really say we're very musical. I do have a brother who plays guitar, but the rest of us, we're not musical at all. And my parents never pushed me to pursue music. Sometimes I wish they did, because I don't play the instrument now. But so where are you from, and where did you grow up?
I'm originally from Pomona, California. I grew up in Pomona.
Okay.
My mom and dad, they're still pastors in Pomona. I moved to Moreno Valley in 1996. I adopted twins.
Oh, wow.
From Loma Linda.
Wow.
Go figure, right?
Yeah.
Me and my wife, we tried to have children for 15 years. And when man said that it was impossible, God stepped in and said, anything is possible. So after we adopted the twins, we ended up having 2 biological children of our own.
Wow, that's fantastic. Such a cool story. You know, my family, we'd adopted 2 girls from Ukraine and Bulgaria, so I know a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah.
So is there anybody in your family that's musical? Maybe your parents? You know, your mom, she wanted you to sing, but was she musical in any way?
I have an aunt who's a choir director.
Okay. Yeah.
And I have my oldest brother who plays saxophone. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, very cool. So where else have you sang, and has Albert come with you, or where have you guys gone together?
I was blessed to have Albert play with the Community Church of God Choir from Pomona in 1992 and 93 at the McDonald's Gospel Fest held in Los Angeles. at the Shrine Auditorium. And the competition of 92, we ended up winning first place.
Wow.
I was the lead vocalist, and we were invited back for our second year. And Albert also accompanied us playing for the concert. It was a blessing.
That's awesome. So how long have you two been going around to different places?
I'm going to say maybe 15, 20 years.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very long time. So this is a bit of a deeper question, but how do you see God working through your talent and Albert's talent?
Well, with all the destruction and craziness going on in the world today, sometimes people just need a subtle word, not from us, but from God. And a lot of things being said through music, I think it's soothing for the soul. Mm-hmm. And if you sit down and just be still sometimes and just listen, you can hear God talking to you if you allow that to happen. So I just find it really refreshing to minister through music.
Amen. Yeah. And, you know, it seems like everybody or most people like music. You know, there's a lot of different types of music out there. Is there any type of music that has inspired your music?
I love jazz. Mm-hmm. There's not too many lyrics in jazz.
Right.
You can't really misinterpret it too many ways. Mm-hmm. But I love gospel. Mm-hmm. I mean, the old school gospel, you know, that really had meaning and lyrics to that.
That's cool. So your first song, when you were playing it, I could hear the gospel and also a little bit of a jazzy tone on the piano. I liked it.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was very nice.
Thank you.
Marlon, is there any questions you would like to ask? I know sometimes you like to ask the musicians questions.
I was just wondering, how does this holiday season help you celebrate the birth of Christ?
Was that
Put you
directed
more
for
in
me?
the mood, or?
You know, every day I want to celebrate it more throughout the year. I don't think it's just a one-day celebration. I think we should celebrate every day of the year if possible, just giving love and hope to someone else. It's not about us this Christmas season, any season. It's about giving. And I just want to give all year round if I could.
Mm-hmm. Are there any last words that you would like to tell our viewers, words of encouragement or anything?
God is real. You might not have a lot to you, but if you place it in God's hands and give it to God, the battle's not yours, it's the Lord's. And he'll handle anything that comes your way. He won't give you anything too much to bear. Mm-hmm. So keep the faith and love one another. I think that's what he requires.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to hearing your songs coming up. Marlon?
Well, thank you, Mekensie. Well, it's time to take you far, far away, Papua New Guinea. I don't know what the year was, but I think it's pretty early year. We have Dale Goodson here. He's a missionary trainer and a district rep for the Adventist Frontier Missions. And I want to welcome you to the program. Dale, what is Adventist Frontier Missions?
Adventist Frontier Missions is it's a missionary sending agency. It's a 501c3, so it's tax deductible for people that donate. We operate 100% off of donations. And if you look at Revelation chapter 7, we have this huge crowd of people surrounding Christ's throne from every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. And FM is just dedicated to making sure that every nation, kindred, tongue, and people is actually there. We focus our attention on reaching out only to the unreached people groups of the world.
So how do you determine who's unreached?
We look to see if they're in the, well, first off, are there any churches in the area, within that tribal group or that people group?
Any third world country? You're not really concentrating in the first world countries?
We focus a lot on the 1040 window, which is, if you want to know more about that, you can Google it, and it'll show you a map. But we're looking for any unreached people groups around the world. And currently, they figure there's a couple organizations like the Joshua Project. There's a couple others that do research to see how many there are. And they currently say there's about, well, there's thousands, put it that way.
Yeah, so it's not really difficult to find.
Correct.
So how do you reach people to tell the story?
Good question. The basic premise, I think, of all good discipleship is friendship and trust. And so we send missionaries to unreached people groups, and they spend some time learning to speak the language and developing trust and good, solid friendships with local people. And then we do several things, like we want to make sure that when we communicate the gospel, they accurately understand, and that it makes sense, and it's appealing, and it's easy to remember, and easy to share. And if they have the capacity to remember accurately and share it, then that's the first step towards the discipleship taking place and movement taking place.
So when did you first meet Jesus?
I met Jesus in Canada. I was young.
How old were you?
I was 16.
Yeah.
And somebody developed a friendship with me, built trust, and took me on a canoe trip and shared Jesus with me there. And that's when I met Jesus.
Been with him ever since?
Ever since.
Yeah. So how do you learn the gospel message in order to teach it to someone that doesn't know it?
Yeah, good question. The Bible has got several books dedicated to do just that, just to teach the gospel, that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. My favorite is probably Luke or John. I like both of those. John is designed for new believers, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke appear to be more designed towards existing believers to kind of help disciple them a little more and help them to work with other people. So,
I appreciate the accuracy of Luke.
yeah, Luke's a doctor. He takes very fine details.
Right. So what is the future of AFM, Adventist Frontier Missions? Is it a part of the conference, or is it a supported ministry? Tell us about that.
So Adventist Frontier Missions is a supporting ministry for the Seventh Adventist Church. So we don't get paid by the church, but we work right alongside the church and reaching out into these unreached areas. And
They encourage you in your efforts.
absolutely,
Yeah.
we like to cooperate just hand in hand as we move forward.
So tell me about your first missionary experience. I mean, you're a missionary trainer, but you had to have begun somewhere.
Yeah, good question. So in 1994, my wife and I signed up and we went through our training. 1995, we went to Papua New Guinea and entered the jungle. And you can imagine, like, here we have suits, nice clothes here, and then these are the clothes of the people that we went to meet. So major
Show us
difference.
that. What is that?
This is just a piece of tree bark.
Wow.
And they would run the string. It's folded. They would run a string through there, and the men wore this on the back.
Yeah, hold it up there so the camera
Okay.
can get a picture. Just
So the men would wear this on the back,
yeah.
and they would wear grass on the front. This is actually a grass skirt from a child.
Right here. Can I pick it up?
Sure.
So we got this little.
You can try it on if you want.
Well,
Let's keep you
I think
proud.
it's beyond my girlish figure.
So a girl would wear the grass all the way around, and a guy would have the tree bark on the back and the grass in the front. So you could easily tell from a distance whether it was a male or a female.
So it almost looks like bark leather.
It is. It's tree bark. They beat it flat. In fact, they use this stone here.
Okay, let's pick it up and hold it to the camera.
Okay. So this is the
viewers
stone
can see it.
they use. You notice they've taken another sharp stone and cut
yeah.
grooves in that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just
they
hold
would-
that still for a minute so they can get a picture of it.
So they would take a log, lay this tree bark on the log, and then beat it with the stone.
Yeah.
And this was given to me by a really good friend.
I thought you were going to tell me it's like a giant bean or something.
No.
I've never been to Papua New Guinea. What's the weather like in there?
We got around 12 feet of rain a year.
No,
Wow.
And we'd have extended dry seasons where it wouldn't rain very much for months, and then we'd have months when it rained all the time.
So what's the femur on the table for?
It's a bone knife. Do you want me to hold that up?
Oh, yeah,
as well?
please. That's very interesting.
It's a bone knife. It's a cassowary femur,
Yeah.
and they use this for
Whose femur?
a cassowary, whose femur. It's a bird a little smaller than an ostrich.
Turn it around a little bit. I can see the hollow note. So it's like a mini ostrich, like 4 or 5.
Yeah, a cassowary is
That's
the
a big
most.
bone.
It's the most dangerous bird in the world.
Oh, wow.
So it's large. You can get them that are 150, 200 pounds for a real big one.
Most dangerous bird in the world, both in life and in death. Why are they so dangerous?
They have like 3 big toes, and if they feel threatened, they'll attack, and they'll rip you up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's not a totally safe place to be. I mean, are they aggressive?
They're not necessarily aggressive. I was more
Your
concerned
camp,
with
or-
snakes than I was for cassowaries.
So tell us about your initial experience. What was your confidence level, and just
I think I went out fairly confident.
But when you got there,
Yeah, fairly confident. But obviously, I mean, there was a major difference in worldview and culture.
yeah,
And it took a while to understand how people think. So again, we could communicate the gospel, they could understand and remember and share. And I made a lot of mistakes. I think the first time we engaged in evangelism, we had lots of results, 100 people every Sabbath, 28 baptisms. We went on furlough, came back, and everything had fallen apart. And then we had to ask the question, did they understand the gospel or did they reject it? And the answer was they didn't understand it. Did they understand how to apply biblical truth to their lives or not? And the answer was they didn't. So we had to back up and start over again to make sure that they understood and they knew how to apply what they were learning.
got a couple of minutes left, and I just want to ask you what you look for in missionary candidates. Where these people come from, and in a nutshell, what you teach them.
So one of the things that we look for, we'd like to see people who are actually engaged in discipleship here on the home front. If they've never engaged in discipleship here, it's going to be really challenging when they get to a foreign culture and a foreign language. So we'd like to see people who are involved in discipleship here, and preferably cross-cultural discipleship. But if not, then we can deal with just discipleship. And we do train them. We train them for language learning. We train them for how to explain the gospel in terms people can understand. How to assist people in applying biblical teachings in their own home culture and context, so their lives and cultures are improved. We teach a wide medical skills, and we have a wide range of things that we prepare them for.
So, if I were to give you the last word, what would you say to our audience around the world about Adventist Frontier Missions and why it's so important to support ministries like yours and the ministry of LLBN?
Yeah, I think all of our ministries, we really want to see the Lord come soon, and we like to see that huge crowd, in Revelation 7 of people from every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. And everything we can possibly do to help move that forward, whether it be going as missionaries or supporting the work there or supporting the work here, just to prepare people for the Lord's return. The most we can do is what we need to be doing. Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Ganim?
Oh, I just want to go back to a statement you made, that when you left after the first time, you find out why, when you came back, have lost many of them because they didn't understand. And I think that's so important, a lesson for all of us to have as we preach and as we witness. Let's give the unbelievers baby food to bring them to Jesus so they can digest the gospel and understand it in baby steps until we help them to mature and grow in their faith.
Yeah, the objective is that they could hear the gospel, not that we could speak the gospel.
That was the issue. They can understand the language.
Yeah, they could. I was speaking the same language, but I'm thinking like an American, and they're listening like someone who lives over here. It made a big difference.
Regardless, they're both good lessons, I think, here in this case to be learned, because always when we teach the gospel, it has to be done with clarity.
Absolutely.
Mekensie.
Yes, so we have another musical number by Mark and Albert. I'm very excited to hear it, and it is called He Looked Beyond My Faults.
Amazing grace shall always be my song of praise, for it was grace that bought my liberty. I do not know just why he came to love me so. He looked beyond all of my faults and saw my needs. For I shall forever lift my eyes to Calvary, to view the cross where Jesus died for me. How marvelous that grace that caught my falling soul. He looked beyond every last one of my faults and saw my needs. I shall forever lift my eyes to Calvary, to view the cross where Jesus died for me. How marvelous that grace that caught my falling soul. He looked beyond all of my faults, and he saw my needs.
Amen.
Amen. Well, folks, now we're ready to go to Dr. Rafael Canizales to share with us his message. The title of his message is The Story of Joseph.
I want to share with you the story, a story of Joseph that when you read this passage quickly, you miss it. There's a lot of precious truths in the Bible that when we read it so fast and when we don't stop and dwell on the passage, we miss altogether. And let me share with you this verse in Matthew chapter 1, verse 18. Now the birth of Jesus Christ was as follows. After his mother Mary was betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child of the Holy Spirit. This is a very brief description of a culture that is so withdrawn, so far away that we really don't understand what's going on. But in that culture, when two people were going to get married, it wasn't like the type of weddings and marriages that we envision today. They considered that two people getting married was really the union of two different families. So the family, really, the father and the mother, but mostly the fathers, were the ones that were most involved in selecting the spouse for their children, for their son or their daughter. Sure, they consulted, they gave the chance to the two young people to give their opinion and to give some input, but the majority, the weight of the decision really rested on the family, on the father and the mother to a lesser degree. Once everything had been agreed on the marriage of these two people, then the fathers would get together and talk about form an agreement, how they were going to do things, and if there was going to be some exchange of wealth. Once everything was settled, then they brought the two people together and they would exchange wedding vows. And from that point on, they were considered to be married, except for the fact that they were beginning this period of betrothal, something that we don't practice in our modern societies. But during this time, the two young people were considered to be married, yet they had certain conditions. Number one is that they had to wait until the ceremony of bringing the wife home. So during this time, it wasn't wasted. It was a time for the groom or the husband to prepare a home for his new family, for his bride. Also, it was a time for the wife to engage, practice some purification rituals and to prove that she was sexually pure. And also, it was a time for them to meet under very strict guidelines with supervision and to get acquainted and to start forming the bond that they needed to become physically husband and wife. So this time of betrothal was a time in which they were legally married, yet they were not supposed to have any physical contact, especially the type that would result in in conception. And this precisely was the time when everything changed. And let me read another verse, verse 19. Then Joseph, her husband, being a just man and not wanting to make her a public example, was minded to put her away secretly. We don't know exactly how Joseph found out that Mary was with child. But when you read this description, this brief description in these two verses, in this passage in Matthew, if you skip by it, you go fast, you don't realize how difficult that experience was for everybody involved. Imagine Mary having to tell this incredible story that God visited her, an insignificant teenage woman, and told her the most amazing thing, that she would be with child and that this conception would come directly from God. This was incredible. this was so difficult to believe because there was no precedent. And when you think of Joseph, he must have wondered in his mind and have this turmoil about this whole situation. This only happened to the worst of people. This never was supposed to happen to him and to their two families. Mary was such a lovely person. He was truly in love with her. But what has she done? This story, he couldn't believe this story. And he started thinking that it was such a complicated situation that perhaps it wasn't wise for him to go ahead and believe her and form a family with her, because there would be consequences to pay. Everybody in town, this was a small town, Nazareth. It was not a secret, because if they spent months apart and she was starting to show that she was pregnant, then everybody would immediately know, and the news would spread like wildfire. He started thinking, this is no good. This is very bad. And his initial thoughts were for him to quietly divorce her, just something within the two families, and let her go back to her family or stay with her family and try to pick up the pieces and fix her situation. Now, one thing that he could have done, legally speaking, is to have a public trial so that he could prove to everybody that he was innocent, so that she would have to confess whom she committed adultery with and his name be cleared, but then the consequence of that would have been death by stoning. But he did not want that for her. He was a good person. He was a person that wanted to help her. No scandal, no public recognition. Just go your way, I'll go my way. But then God also intervened in his life. And that's where we pick up the story again in verse 20, where it says, "But while he thought about these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take to you Mary your wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit, and she will bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." Now, there's something very interesting here. If you and I were probably planning on how to accomplish this whole thing of the birth of Jesus, we probably would have sent the angel first to Joseph and then to Mary, so that he would be on the same page, so that he wouldn't have that anguish and that horror of this whole situation falling apart and becoming a public scandal, and they would be together supporting each other. But no, the Lord chose to do it this way because there is an important lesson in this for us. And the lesson is this: God calls people to the ministry. God calls people with a lot of talents. People that perhaps we see are doing a great job, a wonderful job serving the Lord. And we think that we don't have the same talents as they have. I remember when I was first a member, a young person in the Adventist church, hearing about these pastors that not only did they preach crusades, not only were they able to lead churches, but they could sing and play music, they could fly airplanes and do so many things, and I was astonished at how much talent some of these people had. And I always thought, I'm not like that. I don't have that knowledge. I don't have those talents. God had called Mary to be his servant and to be the vessel through which Jesus was going to be born. However, she could not do it alone. Yes, she could not do it alone. She needed somebody's support. And God called Joseph to be exactly that person. It wasn't going to be easy for Mary. It wasn't going to be something that, even in spite of her having the gift of the Holy Spirit upon her, she could not do that by herself. She needed somebody's support. And that makes us think about all those missionaries that we were hearing about. The missionaries that need our support. Perhaps we can't go to those faraway places. Perhaps we can't preach to the masses, but we can be of support. Think of all those pastors that are leading congregations. Maybe you can't preach like them. Maybe you don't have that gift of leadership that they have, but you certainly can be the person that supports them. When Joseph had the dream and heard the words of the angel, that was to him the realization that everything was going to be well, that everything was going to be okay. He woke up from that dream feeling encouraged, feeling full of faith, full of courage, feeling that everything was going to be perfect. But you know, just like them, just like us, he also had that moment where that encouragement settled down, and then he started realizing, there's going to be a lot of problem here, because even if I take Mary with me, I take her home after the betrothal is over, everybody is going to believe that we committed this sin together. In other words, it was like accepting in a public statement that he is the one guilty of getting her pregnant. But in spite of that problem, in spite of all the difficulties that represented in that small town of judgmental people and intolerant people, he decided, I am going to serve the Lord. Because just like Mary, when we are called to serve the Lord, many times we have to make sacrifices. Not only those missionaries have to make sacrifices, not only the people who give their lives to ministry have to make sacrifices, but we are all called to serve the Lord and to support, and that means that we might be called to make sacrifices. Imagine Joseph and Mary. I don't know exactly what the ceremony was like, but I know they did not have limousines. I know they did not have special vehicles. So I see the husband and the wife showing prominently that she was pregnant. But he chose to walk with her. He chose to share the shame that she was experiencing and give her support. And that, my friends, tells me that the Lord is going to help us too. Just like he was called to serve the Lord, and just like he was inspired and he accepted that commission at that moment, and later on realized, wow, this serving the Lord is a difficult thing, but I am going to follow his prompt. I am going to obey the vision, and I am going to take Mary home, and no matter what happens, I will serve the Lord. Are you willing to say the same thing to God? Are you willing to say, Lord, thank you for calling me to service. Thank you for calling me to support others in ministry, and give me the strength, give me the courage, give me the power so that I can overcome any injustices, any difficulties, and I may render my service to you. I hope so. God bless you.
Amen. Come and join us, please. Pastor Anderson, it's really interesting when we listen to this story. We've heard all of it since almost childhood, right? We hear it again and again, and it never gets old. But even the Lord himself, when he came to earth as a child, him and his family were subjected to earth and justice. It wasn't exactly a cakewalk. Even for Jesus, the Lord could have intervened and set the most perfect conditions for Mary and Joseph. But it seems like that didn't happen. The Lord allowed nature itself, the whatever it is, the laws of this planet will live on, to take course, which really is an inspiration to me. That means when we go through trouble and hard time, there is God. God has our back. God is overlooking our situations. But we must go through these difficulties sometimes in life to meet our objectives. Do you see it that way, or do you have a different take on that?
No, I agree. I appreciate your message, Doctor, very much. When we think of the cross, we think usually that it belonged only to Jesus. But from your sermon tonight, we see that there was a cross for Joseph as well. And there was a cross for Mary. And the whole story, as you've pointed out, Ganim, involved sacrifice for everyone. And sometimes that's the way it is for us too. We have to be willing to bear what the Bible calls the shame of the cross in our own life, because there may be a circumstance in which we are called to stand up for Jesus that it may not be a popular stand. You mentioned the culture back then, and our culture is much different today. Back then, it was a huge scandal to become pregnant before you were actually married. Today, it's not so. I grew up in the 60s, and we coined terms like love child or so on. It's just not looked at the same way now. But we may be called, it seems to me, to bear the shame of the cross in a different way, to stand up for what the Bible teaches on certain things, that the tide of society is shifting another direction today. Go ahead.
There is a zone, let me call it a zone, that Paul talks about in the service of Christ. He spoke about suffering all kinds of trials and tribulations. And we read the list of stonings, of incarceration, of beatings, of hunger, and he doesn't even mention how much he walked for Jesus, right? And being rejected and attacked. And he talks about the privilege of suffering for Jesus. Our society teaches us that suffering is bad. None of us want to suffer. We are fortunate to live in a time in which they have created anesthesia. And we don't know what suffering is when we go have some type of surgical procedure. So we have gotten very weak in that sense. But a call to follow Jesus many times is a call to make an effort, to sacrifice, and yes, to suffer for Jesus.
Another point that, if I can make a quick comment, it just struck me that our program began with a beautiful song by our brother Mark, and it had to do with ordinary people. And as you were relating the message tonight, I thought this is a perfect segue to the story that you're actually talking about, that the Lord chose what would be considered ordinary people,
Yes.
And yet what an incredible purpose they served. You know, I think there's going to be a special reward for Joseph and for Mary, and even the brothers and sisters of Jesus that grew up with that, and that misunderstood beginning, the miraculous birth of Jesus, was something that Satan brought out on occasion. He pulled that card out to taunt Jesus. Yes. And the Jewish people later, when they were discussing their honored parentage from Abraham, they pulled it out and they said, we weren't the ones born of fornication. Yes. And everybody knew what that meant. And that was a part of the cross that Jesus had to bear his whole life. But Joseph had his suffering with that too. Thank you for sharing that.
And you know, sometimes, I mean, it takes suffering and trials to help someone develop their faith and a stronger relationship with God. So suffering, as you said, is not always such a bad thing. I mean, there are some extreme suffering that it's hard to bear, but most trials and difficulties does help shapes us to draw closer to God. And I mean, I look back at everything in my life. Has it not been for the trials I went through, I wouldn't be where I'm at spiritually with my Lord today. It's not that God was breaking me down. It was just that's what it takes for us to discover things within ourselves and to understand more of our relationship and coexistence with our Creator. Well, thank you. This has been wonderful. Let's not lose track of our program today. We have, I think, more music here.
We get to enjoy one more musical performance by Albert and Mark, and they're going to be doing the song "His Eye is on the Sparrow."
Amen. Amen. That's fine.
Why should I feel discouraged? And why should the shadows come? And why should my heart feel lonely, lonely for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, a constant friend is he, for his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches over me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches over me. Well, I sing because I'm happy, and I sing because I'm free, for his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches over me.
Thank you. Before we run out of time, I want to make sure to thank Mark and Albert, Dell, Pastor Anderson, Dr. Canizales, Marlon, and Mekensie for being with us today in this program. As we approach the end of the year, we want to thank you folks for helping us sustain our programming on LLBN for the last 12 months, but more so through your giving, we've been able to sustain 8 television networks. That's phenomenal. It's all done through your personal givings. We don't have any deep pockets or organizations locally or beyond to support the ministry of LLBN. These wonderful folks here, they're all volunteers. They put their time into the ministry of LLBN. Of course, Mekensie's an employee, along with some others, but we needed them and we hired them to support the mission of LLBN. Since we all have jobs, we can't keep our doors open during the day without them. But thank you, folks. It's been a great partnership to share the good news of Jesus. I think in Matthew 24:14, We've been talking about that for the last week. The very last promise Jesus, he talked about the signs of times and the signs before his return. It was, and the gospel shall be preached to all nations. We take pride in that, as you told us what you're doing and how you're trying to share the gospel in those villages and towns, and how LLBN, through the airways, reaching out to millions of people around the world, all done through your giving. That's phenomenal. That is a miracle by itself. Marlon, one thing we haven't talked about for a long time is the power of prayer, and how can people call in LLBN to utilize our prayer line?
Well, the number is at the bottom of your screen. Just to dial the prayer line number, and you will be able to be connected with someone that can help you rejoice. They can help you through your suffering. They can give you advice, and they just can be a friend to talk to. So take advantage of the service that LLBN provides in the prayer line. You'll be blessed. We want to thank you for your prayers for this ministry, because it's really important, especially at this time of year. Ganim?
Well, thank you, Marlon. Dr. Anderson, any message to our viewers to how they should support this ministry?
I was thinking of the message that was given by our brother, Dr. Rafael, and even as Joseph and Mary and Jesus, the story began with sacrifice and support. You mentioned how Joseph stood by her and supported her, and that's one way our viewers can help today, by supporting the ministry, by standing by and sacrificially giving so that the gospel can go around the world.
Amen.
And Dr. Canizales, you've been supporting LLBN through your efforts of taping. You haven't seen any marble-built studios or gold-plated chairs?
I just want to say thank you also to all the people who are so generous with LLBN. We started LLBN Latino about 5 years ago. We are preaching the gospel, reaching people in the most incredible of places like Korea, in Spanish, yes, Korea, strange Pakistan. They're everywhere. They're listening to the gospel. Thank you.
Amen.
Mekensie, any last words?
You know, supporting LLBN is something that we can all do in different ways, and if you support LLBN, you know that your money is going to a good area. So.
Thank you. And of course, don't forget our brother Dell and his ministry in this time of the year. Bless his ministry as well. God bless you, and thank you for helping us share the gospel throughout the world. We'll see you next week.